Coming up on Chasing the Natty, it's officially 2022 season, and we got a lot to talk about. The transfer portal continues to burn, as we got more and more high-impact players entering and exiting to new destinations. And finally, we answer the question, what happens when the Natty Chasers have their natty? All that and more coming right up.
Zappy looking to Jarrett Stearns, who makes the catch and scores.
What a burst! Trayvon Henderson, as advertised, touchdown Buckeyes!
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast. All right, welcome in everybody. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. I hope you guys are having a wonderful, wonderful day. I'm having a great day because today is the first snowfall in 2022 for Athens, Georgia, and more than likely it'll probably be the only real snowfall that we get all year, but it's actually sticking to the ground. It's a miracle in Georgia today. I don't think y'all realize, as soon as we're finished with this podcast, I'm going outside. I'm going to play in the snow like I'm 10 years old because that's what I like to do. But anyway, welcome to the Chasing the Natty podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed that new intro. If you're watching on YouTube, I got actual things with it. It's not just some still image guys rolling across the screen. Got some actual video with it. Loving to do that now. But even still, like I said, we're turning over the page officially to 2022. Pretty much almost all content from here on out. We'll be talking about what we're going to be doing into next year. But even still, we got an incredible show for you guys today. We got an incredible guest on. It's the first guest I ever had on Chasing the Natty. I figured I'd bring him back on again to start off 2022. So the hitman himself, Mr. Mitch Hardt. How you doing, sir?
Every day's a great day to be Mitch, man. How are you doing? You should be on cloud 9. I'm at least on cloud 7 for you, but how you doing, man?
I am on cloud 10, my friend. Again, we'll have plenty of time to discuss why I might be there, Georgia National Championship. But even still, I'm just stoked to really just officially turn the page over to 2022. I started developing my rankings and everything. I've got my initial quarterback rankings. I got my initial running back rankings. I'm going to be working on wide receiver rankings later today. And I'm really excited because in the next few weeks, depending on how fast we get it done, we will have our first mock draft for CFF in 2022 done. And I will try to get some guests on to discuss that for you guys. So much exciting stuff going on. And again, with some other things, more exciting announcements coming up. I keep teasing that the last couple of weeks, but again, things are just taking a little bit longer than I was expecting. But you guys are going to love what I will be doing in the next upcoming few weeks. But even still, Mitch, I appreciate you coming back on, and we're just going to start today with a couple questions I have for you. I've been asking these to a couple of guests that have been coming on the past couple of weeks, and I figured I might as well get your opinion on it. A little bit of closing the door in 2021, opening 2022. So, biggest lesson you learned in college fantasy football this year?
All right, that's a good one. So for me, I guess I will answer that with systems matter, from scoring systems to waiver systems, and more importantly, offensive systems. You know, sometimes even a grizzled veteran like me doesn't concentrate on some of the basics, and it kind of caught up to me this year. I guess what I mean is, like, know your scoring system. Know when someone throws a tight end and you jump into a league, your universe for that tight end, or scoring systems for defense and just how important they can be. Sometimes I just take a very generic list. I don't always dive down into those things. So systems matter. I'll be looking at every league individually a little closer with that. And with that, for me, the waiver system, one of the things that I am going to make changes in the league that you and I are in, and I will push for others. No more, if you're in last, you get to pick first. In nearly every league that I was in, me included in a league, that was this way when I started off slow. I was able to pick up those good free agents at the beginning of the season, and and those guys really carried me to the end. And then finally, the offensive system from Western Kentucky with everyone on their team. You should have known that from Houston Baptist. Bama and their running back, again, was a stud, even though most experts were down on them. Ohio State, running backs from the Big 12, running backs from the MAC. Systems matter. That's what I learned again in 2021.
I don't think that's a lesson you could ever really forget in CFF, because again, that's the thing that really differentiates it from like NFL and stuff like that, where a lot of people are like, oh my God, like so many different players to keep track of in college fantasy. It's like, well, you keep track of the players, of course, because you're going to have players that you would never expected to be fantasy relevant, but you can always count on the running back for Alabama giving you a ton of points. The running back for Clemson, Will Shipley, he's going to give you a ton of points this next year, regardless of whether he's going to be splitting time with Kobe Pace or not. He's going to be great for you. The quarterback in a Mike Leach system, he's always probably going to be a top 24, top 12 QB for you. There's just some things you can just get behind, no matter really who the player behind it is, because sometimes the system is going to lift them up no matter what. I definitely appreciate you putting on Brian Robinson there, because I remember when we did the summa cum laude draft, I drafted Brian Robinson, and you tore me a new one. You're like, no way he's going to be able to keep that up and be the lead back at Bama. Well, he proved a lot of people wrong, and myself included, though, because if I had known he would be the lead back by the end of the year, I would have drafted him in the first 2 rounds, easily. Of course. But I was waiting until round 8, 9 to get him.
One more thing that you showed me, actually, that I'm incorporating and began to incorporate in my home league at the end of the year are replacement players for DNPs. It's the best development fantasy-wise that I saw in 2021 was listing your quarterback, your running back, and your flex of choice if no one DNPs, or if a certain player or any of that position does not play. I will be using that moving forward. You had a very cool thing with the Google Sheet. I will share with you, though, I prefer to put it on the message board. Okay. So then there's full transparency. Where,
I think that's fair.
If I see somebody, that I'm facing doesn't play, I kind of have to wait until the commish drops in their guy, and sometimes I don't know. It actually happened in the league that you commissioned that I was in. It happened, and I was like, well, I know that the guy got a 0, so do I? First, I didn't know if he sent you the list. And then second, I didn't know who he picked. So it was about, it was about 4:00 Eastern time, 2:00 my time in Mountain. Yes. And then the guy went in. So then I was down 16, and I was like, okay, so all right. So at least it didn't hurt me bad. I was still in it and ended up winning. But that is a very good idea. So again, just to slowly say it, because I know I speak fast. When you have a bench quarterback, you can list JT Daniels. If either of my starting quarterbacks does not play, then put him in. With COVID and the lack of news from college football, I just think it's smart. It makes the league better. That's just a really good rule.
And to me, it's better than the alternative, and not I love Nate Marquise to death here and everything, but his alternative was just make it best ball. And best ball with waivers and with trades and stuff like that. It's not the same. And it's not. I get where he's coming from, but to me, part of fantasy, especially in a year-long fantasy league, is the agency you can have with your lineup. It's knowing that when you put in a player that is your choice, and you were the one that made that decision. It wasn't very luck-based at all. There's still some skill involved there. And I appreciate your feedback on the making sure that if you're a commissioner in a league and you're doing this, I use the Google Sheet because that makes it organized. It just puts it into an Excel spreadsheet. Very easy for me to go back to and look at it. And I agree with you, though, that if you're a commissioner, you then need to put that out at a time before the game starts, saying, alrighty, here's the people who have put in their lists. Here's who's going to be able to get replaced. If you didn't already, you're out of luck. And that incentivizes people more to make sure they get their lists in. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Mitch, because again, I highly recommend that for almost any league, because to me, it takes out one of the least fun parts of college fantasy football, and that's the fact that we just never get any news, especially from Group of 5 schools, and heck, Power 5 schools never really give you good news on that front. So
yeah, what I used to do was I would sub in the lowest score from your bench that played into that position. But then I had a real clever owner during the playoffs. He dropped almost all of his bench. So it was just like he took out the idea of who to start by only having one bench quarterback, 2 bench running backs, and a bench wide receiver. So he was just like, but I tell you, hey, it's working the system. But I really, I enjoyed that. And your Google sheet is smart. We just need to share it.
Yeah.
Just share it with others, and then you can see, and then you'll know. Because again, for me, it's not about transparency of cheating. Mm-hmm. It's about, do I need to go out to eat because I don't have a chance to win? Or do I have a chance to win? I'm going to agonize through if, Jameson is going to go for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. So
yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, great. So great, just a beautiful thing that happened in 2021 is that I learned that, and I'm always learning. So I'm thankful for that.
Absolutely. And so I'll go ahead and move on to the second, kind of intro question here. We talked about kind of recap of 2021, what did you learn? But what are you looking for in 2022? What's something maybe changes you want to see in leagues? Maybe it's players that you're looking forward to. What are you looking forward to, Mitch?
Chaos.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking forward to the chaos. NIL is all up in our grill. College football will not be the same until something, and I don't know what it is, but something changes. When you give kids with academic standing the right to change schools one time for free, what you essentially have is a do-over. You have a do-over with hundreds and hundreds of fantasy relevant guys. But honestly, even from the O-line to the D-line, although most folks like you, and certainly everybody like me, does not focus on those men changing teams, it does matter. Next year is going to be amazingly weird. That when coupled with, and I haven't put together numbers for this Dynasty NFL league that I consult with, but I think more people that were eligible for the draft actually went to this year's draft. It is an extremely deep, watered down draft. But what that does is it makes a lot of schools that are near fantasy relevant with guys that would have returned an open season.
Yep.
From schools like West Virginia and Kansas State. And when you start looking at those just under middle tier programs, when they have Letty Brown, you can pick them. When they don't have Letty Brown, those guys go undrafted. And when that happens, that first week of waiver claims or bids is going to be madness. So I can't wait. I can't wait for the madness. It's going to be super cool.
I mean, I agree with you 100%. And talking to Devi guys, talking to C2C guys, one of the things they're most excited about with this is used to be if a guy went to their school and you didn't see them in their freshman or sophomore year, they're basically kaput. You didn't want anything to do with them. But now you got guys who, if they aren't super successful in their first couple of years, maybe they transfer to a new destination. Maybe it was the coaching staff at the old school just wasn't giving them a chance, and they can maybe thrive. They love the idea of the transfer portal being able to resurrect these careers, these fantasy careers, for a lot of prospects that they're looking to go into the NFL in the future. I know Campus Academy guys are especially excited about it because it not only revives them on maybe the NFL side, but also the college side as well. I mean, we love that as well. Because we'll talk about guys here, upcoming here, where some of these guys might be revitalizing their career where they just had a bad couple of years and now maybe they go to a new school. Maybe things work out better for them there. We will definitely see. In terms of 2022 and everything, man, you're talking about chaos. I can already tell though, talking to other fantasy or CFF analysts and everything, their consensus is all the way across the board with so many different prospects.
I was going to mention this during some of our stuff that The college fantasy football Twitterverse often becomes an echo chamber. And I haven't seen that reverberating off of early list yet.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm curious to see once you guys, but hopefully I'll be a part of a few of those drafts, if we begin to align. But this again is going to go with the chaos.
Oh yeah.
I think getting out your Phil Steele book is going to be more important than ever to see this guy has talent. This is a 4-star guy that I've never heard of.
Yes,
This is a 4.3-star guy that I've never heard of. And we'll speak of this in a minute, but there's a guy that at the tail end of my prep here that I want to go over and show people that this is what you should look for. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be as echo chamber next year as it was. And honestly, the largest echo chamber was actually 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Almost everybody, because of COVID, almost everybody got in line, and draft lists were very solid and routine. It digressed a little bit last year, but next year it's going to be crazy. I'm looking forward to stealing your rankings and importing those into mine.
Yeah, I mean, just an example, we were discussing Muhammad Ibrahim the other day, where I think CK was talking about how like he's like, I think I have him in my top 15. I'm like, I think I have him in my like back end of my top 12, so like between like 7 and 12. I can't remember where I have him exactly off the top of my head. And Nate Marquise came in, he was like, I don't even have him in my top 25. Like he's outside my top 25, and I'm like, perfect. This is gonna be fun. This is gonna be great. So much debate is gonna be had over this next coming year, and like a lot of it, like you said, comes from the fact that so many guys are going off to the NFL this year. Like a lot of guys that we've been used to are just gone. So
one other thing that makes it all interesting is the school of thought that if you don't boom early, by the time you're 20, you're washed up.
Yep.
And you brought up your Shipley man. There are going to be those that say, well, Shipley hadn't had 1,000 yards yet. Mm-hmm. Been hearing about the guy for years. If he hasn't been good in his first 2 years, he must be trash. When that isn't always the case. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a really intriguing year for list. I'm looking forward to the list.
I'm looking forward to it as well. And like I said, so many prospects to discuss this year. And we'll just go ahead and move on to some of these guys who are in the transfer portal. And like I said, transfer portal, as we've seen already this year, is just changing the college landscape constantly now. And people who we thought were solidified starters for next year because of coaching changes, because of guys shifting around the country, are now really just almost in no man's land. And there's nobody better to exemplify that than Mr. Jaxson Dart, former quarterback of USC. Threw for 1,353 yards last year, 9 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Ran for 43 yards and 2 touchdowns, so not like a huge dual threat guy, obviously.
Really, more because of his previous injury, though. Okay, I do expect him to run more this year, but keep going.
Yes, I mean, fair enough. But again, this really comes from, and again, this isn't official, so we'll talk about this more down the line when it becomes official, but let's be real, this is a huge indicator that Caleb Williams will be transferring from Oklahoma to USC and is now forcing Jaxson Dart out of a job. And even if this isn't like Caleb Williams coming to USC, to me, it might have come about from just Dart hearing guys like Riley, the AD at USC, talking about like, oh, we need to go get Caleb. We need to go get Caleb. Maybe trust was lost here. And he's just like, regardless if you get Caleb or not, I'm clearly not your guy. So I'm going to move on to a program that is going to treat me like the guy. Just a fascinating saga to follow here. Rumored destination.
Though, if he goes to Ole Miss, I won't mind at all.
Oh no, that's what I was about to bring up. Rumored destinations. The top 3 apparently are Ole Miss, Oklahoma, West Virginia. West Virginia sounds like a weird one, but his old offensive coordinator in Harrell is headed over to West Virginia. So basically, like you said, Mitch, as far as ranking for fantasy for me, Ole Miss, the top choice for me. God, I'd love to see Jaxson Dart in that Ole Miss. We've been waiting for somebody to take the reins over at Ole Miss because, let's be real, Luke Altmaier didn't look like the answer for Ole Miss.
He's not.
John Rice Plumlee, he's gone. Some of the other guys we were considering, like Dylan Gabriel, Cameron Ward, they found other destinations that they're going to. We'll discuss Cameron Ward here in a second. But God, Jaxson Dart in a Lane Kiffin offense, I think would be a ton of fun to watch. Oklahoma, I like Dart in the Oklahoma offense. The problem is Dylan Gabriel just already being there and already having a better repertoire with the offensive staff there. I just think it would be very unfortunate for us as fantasy analysts
I
going forward.
I don't see it. That's not where he's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
The other two are much more likely, and I'm going to be a little more bullish on that West Virginia selection. They will have 0 running game. So that means he's going to throw often. And Will Grier, who was not a good quarterback, he was a dang fine fantasy quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take Dart in West Virginia all day long. I think you get a bump in system. You get a downgrade in the plotting running back with Letty Brown. So now I'll take it. Obviously, Ole Miss would make him. I don't have my list in front of me, but QB2 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The top end of a QB2. He'd be a really, really good quarterback too. So I like it.
So, to be clear to people, when he says QB2, you're talking about top 24 QB there, not like QB2 overall.
No, yes, QB2 means someone ranked from 13 to 24.
Yep.
Yes. Now, just one thing, and I don't want to keep hammering on the obvious. When every kid can choose where he wants to go, and every coach knows it, then the value of the kid you have in front of you is diminished.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sad. It's sad for a bunch of reasons. It's sad because it makes it more like pro football. It's sad because we want that jersey to mean more of the name that's on the front of it than the name that's on the back.
Mm-hmm.
And NIL will ruin that.
Yeah, again, like, not to get too off topic here, but I have to imagine that there will be some kind of changes coming in the near future for NIL because, and again, I quote Josh Pate on this show quite a bit, but he's just great at metaphors, and I think he nailed this one where he said that the NCAA in regards to NIL was like the irresponsible uncle. They came in, got his nieces and nephews, hyped them up on a bunch of sugar, gave them back to the parents, and said, "Here you go, deal with it." That's what they did with NIL. They just kind of came in and said, "All right, we're doing NIL now," and then didn't set any kind of boundaries, didn't set anything, and that's why schools like A&M were just like, "All right, sure, we'll blatantly like bid for players in recruiting. We'll blatantly do stuff like that."
Rumor has it that Texas A&M spent $500,000 a year per recruit in this class.
Yeah,
it will not go away. There are schools like the University of Texas and Texas A&M that actually do have more money.
Yeah,
and it does matter. Also, those schools have been graduating 40,000, people for years and years and years and years,
mm-hmm.
and that base is huge and hungry. I debated briefly on Twitter. A Georgia guy said they have the best fan base. That is not the case. Mm-hmm. Georgia don't have the best fan base because you guys are real good fans on a real good team. Think about having real good fans on a team that's never good.
Mm-hmm.
That's Texas A&M. Texas A&M's an 8-win team year in, year out, yet have the money to be the number one class. But anyway, let's go. Let's talk some more players.
Yes, sir. Let's move on to another quarterback. Basically, how we're taking this today, we're going to hit all the quarterbacks, we're going to hit all the running backs, we're going to hit all the wide receivers, and then Mitch has a group of guys that he wants to talk about that all fall under one umbrella. We'll get to those in a bit here. But first, let's move on to our second quarterback here. And we're going to talk about Mr. Cameron Ward. Kind of touched on him a little bit ago. Transferring from the FCS, Incarnate Word, over to Washington State last year in the FCS. Threw 590 times for 4,648 yards, 47 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Ran 77 times, 61 yards and a touchdown. Reuniting with his former offensive coordinator, who is now the offensive coordinator at Wazoo. Mitch, you look super excited to talk about him, so I'm going to let you kind of do your spiel on him first.
We just did this last year. This is Bailey Zapp and all of his people going, except Incarnate Word isn't sending his wide receivers up there. He'll have better ones than he had when he was in Incarnate Word. It's going to be the same system. He knows the system. They're going to throw every time. What's not to like? Look, I wish he was a little more athletic, or at least ran the ball a little more. He wasn't asked to do it in Incarnate Word, so I don't expect it now. Like, why? They're not going to change the system, which is fine. I expect this to be what it used to be at Washington State. Only worry The weather difference in Incarnate Word and in Pullman, Washington is as stark as can be. It doesn't rain in North Texas, and it rains, it seems like every day in Pullman. So I'm a little worried about ball security. But other than that, I think he's going to be saddled up. Again, great QB2 towards the bottom of a QB2 with the potential to be a top-tier quarterback.
Yeah, so that was going to be my point here. And you're talking about reservations. The only other reservation I have here is it doesn't seem like any of his Incarnate Word, like wide receivers in them, are also following him to Wazoo, like which helped make that perfect storm that Western Kentucky was last year. But granted, we saw a guy like Mitchell Tinsley pick up the system as the year went on, and he absolutely exploded by the end of the year. So can't have too much worries there. But I agree with you 100% on Cameron Ward, where you can have reservations on this guy, but you cannot let him fall too far in drafts because the ceiling for a matchup between him and his offensive coordinator and it working at Wazoo in a Pac-12 conference where, let's be real, they don't play the best of defenses, like the ceiling's too high. You cannot let him fall too far. And I agree with you, Mitch. Right there in that QB2 range is going to be perfect for Cameron Ward going into this year.
Jayden de Laura, in the leagues that I saw and participated in mock drafts, he was a very stylish bench quarterback. Mm-hmm. So like that QB3, someone in the 11th type of round, no way I allow this kid to be a QB3. No way.
Nope.
I'll continually pick him up as my second QB around round 7 or so if that's how it flushes out. I'm down.
Or heck, if you want to wait on QB a little bit and maybe you can pick him up as your first one, try to pick up a safer QB behind him. I wouldn't blame you there at all as well. Again, we'll get into draft strategies and everything once we actually have some drafts come out and everything. We can see where everybody's falling. But I think Mitch and I both agree the ceiling is just so high on this matchup that you got to keep your eye out for this guy. And take advantage of this because there's going to be a lot of people who don't pay attention to the transfer portal. And they're going to be like, oh, just some kid from Incarnate Word going to Washington State. Like, who cares about that? Keep an eye on this man. We'll move on
to many people sort stats from last year's league, and he won't be in there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's scary, too, because it's a guy who threw 5,000 yards.
I agree. So move on to our third and final quarterback here in our list of main 10 here. We just mentioned him, and really he's the byproduct of Cameron Ward going to Washington State. Jayden de Laura, former starting quarterback for Washington State, has entered the transfer portal and is going to Arizona. Man, this is just an interesting development that has occurred at Arizona in that they just suddenly have started acquiring offensive talent. Jacob Cowing, wide receiver at UTEP. A lot of people were very excited to see him go up to the Power 5. A lot of people, and he got offers from everywhere. And a lot of people very disappointed when he chose Arizona. But put this into the context. Arizona suddenly has a top 25 recruiting class for this year, including Mr. Titor. Oh my God, I cannot pronounce it. McMillan, a 4-star, borderline 5-star wide receiver in this class, going to Arizona as well. And now he's got a QB to distribute the ball there. I am very interested to see how this goes. Oh, and by the way, I should have mentioned this. De Laura threw 359 times for 2,798 yards last year, 23 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Just to give you an idea of where he was in the Washington system. Mitch, do you think he hits a higher ceiling than that in this new system?
Yeah, one of the reasons I believe, again, weather is a factor in Washington State, always is. So he gets to go to somewhere that it doesn't rain. He is mobile, but he had to use that mobility in Washington State to run for his life. Mm-hmm. So I think the bad offensive line at Arizona will be just ho-hum, sack of potatoes for him. I think he's used to it. Mm-hmm. 2 good weapons, very good bench quarterback. Not a difficult schedule. You won't have to pay for him. It's not like anyone is looking at, or many people are looking at Arizona as a fantasy factory. So yeah, I think he slides, and I think he's a guy that you can just steal and hope that it gels that first month.
Yeah, I'm trying to look up real quick where he finished as a QB 44 last year at Washington State. So he's probably, now that he's moving down to Arizona, he might go undrafted in several drafts, or at least definitely be a bench quarterback. And I think that's very good value for him to where, again, there's a lot of ceiling here in this new offensive system that is acquiring talent. Now, if they can get a running back, especially like a receiving running back out of the portal, Travis Dye, I would love to see what they might be able to put together next year and the ceiling that was created for this system. So I like this a lot.
I'm with you.
Alrighty. I don't have this as an official one, but I do want to just make sure we point out here. Jarrett Doege, quarterback out of West Virginia, has transferred to Western Kentucky. I do feel like I had him as an honorable mention, but I feel like before we moved on from the quarterbacks, we should talk about this because a lot of people were waiting on a transfer QB to go to Western Kentucky. And by the way, people, Western Kentucky still going to have a lot of the same things that made them successful this year. I know Kitley's at Texas Tech, but Arbuckle, who was the offensive quality analyst for Kitley at both Houston Baptist and Western Kentucky, is now the offensive coordinator. He's going to be running the same system. You have to believe that. So we all were wondering who's going to be the quarterback there that's going to go and benefit from that. And then Jarrett Doege is that guy. Man, a lot of people were, I at least for me, I'm disappointed with that. Mitch, what do you think? Does this hamper any expectations we should have from Western Kentucky, even though they're probably going to run the same system?
Okay, so first, I do expect the system to be very similar. While it might not be 100% of what it was, I do think it'll come in around the 85%, which I'm fine with the discount that you get. That's one. Two, Jarrett Doege is someone that I'm going to flip the opposite of what we'll go over here in a little bit and what we spoke about pre-podcast. When you're good, and when you're not, you're not. And I fear that he is not good.
He is not.
So if you go to a very fantasy-friendly system and you're not good, what I expect is not goodness. I expect you to not be good because you're just not good. So I have a few of those freshmen that they had on the staff last year. And sometimes transfers go to a place and don't start. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he doesn't start. I'm not sweating him with the freshmen that I do have from the team last year. So we'll just see. Obviously, he is more experienced, but sometimes you're just a more experienced subpar player. So we'll see. If he is the starter, again, very good bench quarterback. But to me, they fall from QB. There's no QB1. No Western Kentucky guy is going to get drafted in the first 12. However, if one of the freshmen who had a cup of coffee last year actually had a big spring and moved into the fantasy season as the solid starter, I'm pretty sure our list would align that would have him in the 20s. It's not going to be that way with Doege. He's just not good.
So I actually have talked to somebody who works for the Western Kentucky Rivals Board, and I asked her. I said, for those who are wondering, it's Hannah Page. She's wonderful. You should definitely go follow her. But I asked her. I was like, all right, so what's going on here with Western Kentucky? And she says, and I hope this is one of the freshmen that you got, but Darius Ocean is who she expects to be the guy next year.
Cool.
But when I sent her the information about Jarrett Doege, her response, and I quote, was, "Huh."
That's awesome.
Take that for what you will. But even still, I'm with you, Mitch. Jarrett Doege's not good, so I would rather put stock into Darius Ocean, or any other freshman QB that you want to put your stock into for Western Kentucky, if it is indeed him going forward. Anyway, we'll move on from the quarterbacks. Let's go talk about some of these running backs, and let's talk about a guy that I messed up the graphic for. His name's not Penn State. His name is Noah Cain. He was a running back at Penn State. Sorry about that. Anyway, regardless of that, I was so high on Noah Cain. Even as a recruit, I was watching the pipeline that was being cranked out with Saquon Barkley, cranking it out with Miles Sanders afterwards, and I was like, alrighty, Noah Cain, 4-star freshman. Georgia wanted him bad. I saw him go to Penn State. I'm like, all right, I'm going to follow this guy. He's going to be a great running back there at Penn State. And he started off so well. Freshman year, 84 carries, 443 yards, 8 touchdowns. He and Journey Brown, to me, were set to be that next duo of tandem. of running backs at Penn State, and I was so excited. Then Journey Brown gets injured. He's just out of football. God bless him. Noah Cain gets injured pretty much like, a week or two later. Like, it was just an absolute terrible time for Penn State, and he just hasn't recovered. Nobody's been able to take over that Penn State running back room. This past year, he ran 20 more times than he did his freshman year. He ran for over 100 carries, but he ran for almost 100 yards less. And ran half the touchdowns. He just hasn't recovered. Mitch, is this going to be one of the guys that could find himself with a fresh start, especially at LSU, where Tyrion Davis-Price out, John Emery Jr. is just AWOL, and Kiner was a all-right freshman?
So, okay, I do expect Cain to be a part of a running back by committee. Very Brian Kelly to do that, especially the past few years. He has kind of shied away from one guy running and receiving. I expect Noah Cain to be a part of a running back by committee and just not yield a ton of fantasy relevance. But yeah, is he going to play? Will he have, 700 yards, 7 touchdown type of guy? Yeah. Will he be a good waiver guy when you have an off week? Sure. Talent's there. He'll succeed. His role is not going to be big enough for us to care much.
Nope, I think that's perfectly reasonable. And if you're really a big believer in him, he's more than likely going to be available in those later rounds, so you can pick him up as a flyer, drop him after a week or two when Mitch's prediction inevitably comes true and he's getting maybe 12 carries a game.
Yep.
So, I think that's perfectly reasonable. We'll go to another guy who really had the college fantasy football Twitterverse just ablaze when they saw this, but Xazavian Valladay, running back formerly of Wyoming, now going over to Arizona State. Now, what's the context here? Well, obviously he was part of the big Wyoming exodus. He had a ton of their top players leave. Both of their quarterbacks left. Xazavian Valladay left. Isaiah Nayor, he's gone. All of them gone. But he's going to look for greener pastures elsewhere, and he's going to Arizona State, who just lost Rachaad White to the NFL, who I think he's going to be a very underrated NFL back going forward, especially with this receiving ability. And then DeMonte Trayanum has gone to Ohio State to play linebacker. So you got Daniel Ngata, who really is kind of their main guy going forward, or supposedly is going to be their main guy going forward. This past year, he was the fourth rusher on the team, third running back on the team, 56 carries, 309 yards, 4 touchdowns. So not a super solidified role, I'd say. Do we expect, Mitch, that Xazavian Valladay could be the guy to take over here? What do you think?
Sure, he could be. He's a workhorse type back, but lost his job to a lesser rated younger running back with Titus Swin last year. So I'm definitely not going to put him in a position where I think he's going to rush for 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns. I think it'll be another running back by committee, although I do think he'll get more carries because of the system. I think he's a guy on your bench, and that's about all he's going to be. I was very disappointed in Valladay because I thought he was alpha. And when a younger guy at a smaller school takes your job and you go to a larger school, I'm holding up big red flags. Valladay will be a bench running back for someone else, not for the Ace-holes.
Yeah, so you are not expecting him to reach what Rachaad White was able to reach last year, where
No
Rachaad
way.
White was an RB11. And now, granted, Rachaad White had an incredible receiving ability that I don't think Xazavian Valladay is even close to. So I agree with you. Don't expect Rachaad White numbers out of this. Don't expect expect more DeMonte Trayanum second back numbers, maybe a little bit better than that. I wouldn't expect Valladay to be that next great Arizona State running back.
If I'm a Valladay owner, I hope he's the starter.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm hoping. It is going to be a running back by committee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, to me, you're right. There's obviously concerns about them rotating running backs because they did that last year with White, Trayanum, and
no, they do it. They've done it since Herm's been there.
Yeah.
The first year Herm was there, was it Balaj? that he rode. Ballage had one. Kalen Ballage, I think, had one year under him where he got all the looks, and it hasn't been that way since. Mm-hmm. He's a running back by committee guy. This is running back by committee. It screams at.
Yeah, it's just they run the ball a ton, so it doesn't seem like it sometimes.
Rachaad White, the only reason he really dominated is touches, is how well he caught the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not surprising that Trainium is going to the other side of the ball. Maybe he just didn't have that skill. So one running back got all of those touches where in the past 2 years it had been split. So I'm just I am not for smaller faces in bigger places. I'm for bigger faces in smaller places.
And we will definitely get to that here in a little bit. Appreciate you teasing that, Mr. Hart. But again, we got a couple more guys to get through here. We got about five more main guys to get through here. And we'll go with Mr. running back out of Oregon, Travis Dye. I loved Travis Dye going into last year. Everybody was on Verdell, and to start the year, they were correct. Yeah, he was like, he looked like the main back there. I was kind of disappointed because I always thought that Travis Dye, if he was ever given that ability to have like the number one or the most touches on the team per game, he was going to absolutely dominate. And we finally got to see it last year. Of course, God bless CJ Verdell. He was injured. I believe he tore his ACL. I hope he recovers well and everything. But man, I finally felt so vindicated when Travis Dye got those RB1 touches. And last year, 211 carries, 1,271 yards, 16 touchdowns, 46 receptions for 402 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dude was an absolute dual threat running back through the air and on the ground. Loved what I saw out of him, but now he's gone. He's leaving. And I'm like, no. So that tells me more than likely that CJ Verdell is probably going to come back. I have to imagine Dye wouldn't be scared of Caldwell behind him or any other freshman. Or it could just be a breakdown in the coaching staff. I don't see this trend. Yeah, I was going to say, no. Travis Dye is not running because of something. He's running to something. Look, Bo Nix is there now at the quarterback. I'm sure any coach that chooses Bo Nix as his guy probably scares Travis Dye a lot. So yeah, I don't blame him. Is it really much worse than Anthony Brown?
No, it's the same. And that's bad. Anthony Brown was not good. I spoke earlier in the year about Ty Thompson and thought that this would be the Ty Thompson year, and then they bring in Bo Nix. So I would hope that Ty actually leaves and goes somewhere. No, I argued a lot on a few of our message boards with Oregon people that state they're Oregon people. Mm-hmm. And when Verdell went down, they said Dye wouldn't get more touches. And I just disagree. Mm-hmm. I like his skill set. He's more of a today running back than a 2002 running back, which is more of the version of a guy I like. But the guy is very fantasy relevant. He can run between the tackles. He can get it outside, and he can catch. I would absolutely love to see him in a system that dumps it to the running back often. I think he'd be great at it. I hope this becomes a big face in a small place. I would love to see him downsize in conference and go to a nice situation where he's going to be the best running back. And if so, I think 1,700 yards and 20 touchdowns in the right system is doable.
No, I think you're right. And again, I kind of mentioned it earlier. It was kind of a on the fly moment, but I was like, man, I would love to see him at Arizona, because again, they're putting all those offensive weapons together, and just like you have a guy like Jayden de Laura that just loves dumping off to his running backs in the system at Washington State. I'm just like, man, would love to see him there, because he would be able to do work there.
This is more what I'm thinking. What about like Utah State, somewhere like that, where you have a good system but moving pieces? Devin Tompkins leaves, so it opens up a lot of touches, a lot of quick hitters. Throw him out there in the slot, get him extra stuff in a PPR league, dude. That's what I'm hoping. A system change where we're like, well, hey, that's a good fit in a smaller stage.
Another thought I just had. What if you went to Washington? You got the board there at Fresno State. Like, think about how they used guys like Jordan Mims. Think about how they used guys like Ronnie Rivers. Like, God, I would love that.
No, that would be awesome. Now, that is more of going to even a larger stage. I know UW's been down, but No, that's a great one too. He certainly fits that Fresno State offense from the last few years. I dig that. That would be another really good place. I say Travis Dye lands somewhere, is the starter, and makes someone a dang happy guy that got him as their RB2.
I would love it as well. Again, obviously, as any of these transfers are, location matters, where they land matters, but system matters. But Dye is the kind of guy that even if he lands at a spot where I'm not super excited about, if he's at a discount, I might pick him up just to see what happens. Cool. So we'll go ahead and move on from a running back. So start talking about some of these wide receivers. Obviously, the big one, Mario Williams, transferring from Oklahoma to USC. Another kind of indicator that Caleb Williams is probably going to USC because Mario Williams was very explicit about the fact that he wanted to follow his QB. Well, he's actually the first one there at USC. But even so, last year as a freshman had 35 catches for 380 yards and 4 touchdowns in Lincoln Riley's system, which I think is impressive if you're a freshman wide receiver to get onto the field for Lincoln Riley at any point. But I'm kind of bummed out with this because, man, when the rumors started flying around that he might go to Miami, ooh, man, I like that a lot. With Tyler Van Dyke, with Charleston Rambo going out, I was like, ooh, that could be a perfect fit there. But now he's going to USC, where I'm just so concerned about how crowded this room is going to be. You got Gary Bryant Jr., who really took over after Drake London went down with injury last year. Taj Washington really has been their kind of deep threat guy when they needed him to be. So that role is already kind of filled, in my opinion. And then you got Kyle Ford, who's also just another good receiver out there. Where's the room to be excited about Mario Williams as a potential fourth guy in this system if indeed they roll with the guys who's had more experience at the school? What do you think, Mitch?
So I like Gary Bryant Jr. more as a player, so that worries me. Mario Williams had flashes. I know he's young. When again, young people move. You never really know how it's going to work out. Caleb Williams being the guy does help him out. I think he'll be overdrafted. I will take the second USC wide receiver off the board, not the first.
So if Gary Bryant is there, you won't take him, even though you like him better.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not going to draft any of these guys first. I'll let someone else do it because just like this year with Oklahoma, I wasn't going to draft this year's Oklahoma wide receiver first either and didn't. I made pretty decent money on Mario Williams, getting him very late when everyone went Hazelwood and Theo Weiss and things like that. This is a giant wide receiver by committee, and you don't win by taking that guy first. So yeah, I mean, is he going to be good? Sure, he was good at Oklahoma and had some good moments. Is he going to progress? Of course he is. Until there is a 90 catch role carved out for him, and I don't see that this initial year, I'll pass.
No, I think that's fair. And this, like you said, Oklahoma last year, Ohio State was the one that came to my mind immediately where, like, I never took the first Ohio State wide receiver off the board. Whether it was Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave, I always took the second one because I was like, those guys equally have a chance of being the guy at Ohio State. And really, we were all right at the end because we didn't realize how much Ohio State was going to throw it this year. I mean, hell.
And none of us picked in Jigba first.
Well, exactly.
None of us.
No, none of us. And all three of those guys ended up in the top 25 wide receivers by the end of the year, just to tell you just how crazy that system was for wide receivers that year. But yeah, I'm with you. Is. And they're going to be.
We'll get to that during draft conversations, but that's the system's beautiful now for wide receivers.
I'm telling you guys right now, I think there's an argument for JSN to be the 101 in fantasy next year, especially in PPR leagues. I think there's an absolute argument. And I don't say that about wide receivers very often. I usually stay away from wide receivers in the first round sometimes. JSN could easily be the 101 next year, I think.
When they interviewed all three of those men and were asked who's the best, and the two guys that are about to be millionaires pointed to the young kid, it ain't close.
I agree.
It's not close. This is like when you first saw Julio Jones. This is when you first saw, A.J. Brown and Metcalf go onto the field where you point and say, who is that kid? That's how good he is. But anyway, and Mario Williams ain't that guy.
No, fair enough. I think 100%. I'll ask you real quick, Mitch, just Just one word answer, because I talk about this with C2C guys quite a bit, and they're big on Butte and JSN, like those are the top tier guys. But it's a debate over who's number one. Who would you rather have in like a Devi or a C2C league, Butte or JSN?
JSN. Okay, he's better.
Fair enough.
Yeah. He's a harder worker on the field. The way he runs routes, it's amazing. Butte's specimen. He's good.
Oh yeah,
but I mean, he's going to be very good.
I would say, but we're arguing between each of our different grandmothers' Thanksgivings here. Like they're both going to be great.
Yep.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on. This is more of a personal guy, but I really want to bring him up here because, again, I was big on Kyren Lacy at Louisiana going into this year. He was a guy that kind of stuck out to me, broke out as the leading receiver for Louisiana in his freshman year, and I was really, really hoping that he might have a better year. This year just didn't happen, just not a system built to sustain a fantasy relevant wide receiver. I took him a lot in late in a lot of different drafts. It was like, all right, if he takes a next step forward, I'd love to see what he can do. But now here he is moving up to a bigger stage. He was a big fish at a small pond, as Mitch has kind of been pointing out here. How does he do at LSU? Obvious concern here is that he's going to be buried on the depth chart because they got a lot of different wide receivers there at LSU already. Mitch, what do you think about this?
So, okay, depends on how he fits in initially. And what I mean by that is, like, again, going back to Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly's short passing game is to tight ends and to running backs. If they are expecting Kyren Lacy to catch a bunch of bubble screens and tunnel screens, I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant. However, man, I watched Will Fuller and Chase Claypool make a fantasy living out of running straight down the field as fast as they can and taking the top off. The top off guy at Notre Dame has been good when they've had a quarterback to deliver it. Now, saying all that, I'm not sure if LSU is going to have a quarterback to deliver it, but if they do, and they run Lacy deep, he's got the speed to do it. So this will be a big spring ball. What happens in spring ball? How are they using him? The reports out of camp are going to be good. If you're hearing a lot of bubble screen talk and, he's going to be a 6-catch guy, he's not. But if they're saying that he keeps taking the top off the defense, pay notice.
I think that's very fair. And again, I think the other thing to point out here is that this dude just has the size for a great wide receiver at that level. 6'3", 212 pounds. Obviously, I think that's going to hurt your kind of speed hopes there, that he's probably going to be a guy that could take the top off a defense.
But Chase Claypool did it too.
True.
It's all in how those plays are developed. Because Will Fuller and Chase Claypool are very different wide receivers.
Yes.
But almost all of them caught their touchdowns down the right-hand side of the field. True. So, I watch Notre Dame. I watch every game, every snap. They're so predictable. That guy out there to the right, that's who's going to get the ball really far. If that's Kyren Lacy, do it. I just have a feeling that's going to be Butte.
Nope, I think that's absolutely fair. And yeah, I wouldn't expect Lacy to be the number one over Butte, unless Butte gets injured again, which God help him if that happens again.
Do you believe he was really injured?
So I think
I do not.
I think he was injured initially. I think there's quite a few things going on with a lot of different LSU players that were just saying like, "Hey, season's a wash. Let's just kind of milk this a little bit."
I think he got hurt. I don't think he got injured, and that's why I'm high on Butte. I don't think he's overcoming injury. I think his people said, "Dude, you're playing on a bad team. Why get the ball 13 times and get hit all that?" Anyway.
No, fair enough. We'll go ahead with another group of 5 wide receiver that's caught my eye. I'm very interested in Mr. Trea Shropshire out of UAB. UAB is a run-first team, obviously, but this has been the man, Mitch, that you're talking about, where he is a guy that can take the top off of defenses. 27 catches this past year, 703 yards. 26 yards per catch this man was doing. 7 touchdowns. I love the idea of him moving on to a Power 5 team and just being that deep threat for them over and over and over again. Obviously, landing spot once again going to be a huge thing here, because if he thinks, "Oh, I'll stay in state, I'll go to Alabama," well, I don't think that he's going to be that guy. I don't think I don't think he's got the talent to start at Alabama. But if he went to Auburn, I would love to see that. If maybe he went a little west, and maybe he honestly, I thought about Ole Miss earlier. I was like, maybe if he goes to Ole Miss, might be an interesting place for him to go. What do you think, Mitch?
Big 12. Oh, if he goes to the Big 12. Oh, it'll just taste like chicken. It'll be so good. He fits in to every fantasy relevant Big 12 school.
Mm-hmm.
So go to the Big 12 and flourish. He's going to be the guys that are in our initial mock drafts that fall to the 21st round that we pick, and he will gradually go up if he goes to Baylor, if he goes to Oklahoma State. And seriously, like any Big 12 school, he fits perfectly.
I like to see
go there and flourish.
Kansas State was the team that kind of came to my mind, where you don't have like a set guy at wide receiver, but you got Deuce Vaughn, so they're gonna be throwing to him a lot. But again, you need if Adrian Martinez needs a guy to just chuck it deep to, I have a feeling that Trea Shropshire would be a perfect fit there. I like Trea Shropshire. He caught my eye so many times this year. Really caught my eye first in the Georgia game because he didn't do a lot during that game, but man, did they go to him over and over again. He got behind some of our DBs every once in a while. So I like what I see out of him. Definitely a high potential player.
We talked about Jaxson Dart going to West Virginia. Why don't he follow him and go there and give him a top-off guy? It would be beautiful.
Be beautiful. So we talked about quarterbacks. We talked about running backs. We talked about wide receivers. Got one tight end I feel like we should talk about, and that is Mr. Jahleel Billingsley out of Alabama. Entered the transfer portal after the championship game. And also, if you had told me by the end of this week that Bama would have more offensive players in the transfer portal than Georgia, I would have lost that bet. But even so,
who else? I missed it. Who else is in the portal?
Paul Tyson, the quarterback, is gone. Javon Baker is gone. Trying to think, there's another wide receiver I believe entered this week off the top of my head, but those are the three main guys that kind of come to my head off the top of my head. But Georgia on the offensive side of the ball has only had Justin Robinson enter the transfer portal this week.
Okay, let me go my take on Billingsley real quick. Again, Alabama, they're always on television. They're always fantasy relevant. They normally come on during the time of the day where I get to watch a lot. I am not an Alabama fan. I was watching the game. Billingsley made a couple of critical errors early in the game. What scares me about Billingsley is I don't think he didn't take to this coaching staff. And if you don't take to this coaching staff, you worry me. So what kind of coach does he need to go to get him to be the player that he can be when he wasn't being coached, when he just went out there and played? Because remember, everybody got hurt and he got thrusted into like a wide receiver one role, even from the slot. And he's not a tight end. You can slide that TE off. He does not line up by the tackle and play. This is not Bowers or anybody like that.
Yeah.
However, Billingsley has a lot of talent, but he just makes me nervous. If you can't get coached by Saban and staff and you go to Tennessee, I just am nervous about it. So I'll be way off of this.
I would say okay, so you're gonna be way off of this, and that's fine. I think it's perfectly reasonable. Again, like, he's had every opportunity to succeed this year. He was in Saban's doghouse this year. He's come back from it. Really, like you said, he had a chance to be the guy in the championship game for Bama very early, and they moved off of him after he had repeated mistake after mistake after mistake. So you're completely off of him. What school would make you, like, if he landed there, would make you...
second thought, Cincinnati.
Cincinnati, okay.
Cincinnati uses their tight ends. Their tight ends are good, but not great. We spot shadow them all the time in the, hey, these are really crappy tight ends that you can get a daily play off of. And their coach is outstanding. So if somebody is going to coach them up, I'll take their staff. So it has to be somebody like that, a very strong coach in a system with tight ends. And I have a feeling that that's Iowa. So he goes to Iowa. I say, I'll start listening. Tight end school, well coached. I'll start listening.
I want to throw one. I'm going to throw one more school out there that I want to get your thought on. LSU. Brian Kelly. Been very successful with these wide receiver, tight end blends. We saw how LSU was using Eric Gilbert. I mean, obviously that wasn't Brian Kelly, but even still, like they have a history of developing fantasy relevant tight ends. So, you think LSU might be another option for him?
Could be another. And again, a very solid coach, tight end centric. That's what we need. Yeah. Now, schools like that, if he goes to, again, just Maryland, just a team with a good quarterback, a good offense, and a good coach, I couldn't stay far enough away.
No, I think
and again, I know this isn't the draft show, but if he does go to one of those schools, he's going to be a very high selection because people are going to say, hey, now he's at, Maryland and they don't have a number one or what have you. And I will not run faster away. Again, he was a very solid reason they were losing at the beginning of the national championship. Mm-hmm. He kept messing up. So anyway, I'm going to pass.
Yep, fair enough. And so you now have a list of guys that you're going to kind of run through here real quick that you titled Big Faces, Small Places. So run through those guys real quick and tell me what they all have in common that you're really looking for in the transfer portal with destinations this year.
All right. When anytime I start talking, and it's a lot, there are more things to talk about now than ever because of NIL and that everybody can switch. But back in the day, when a guy went from a big school to a small school, those were the guys that I was very interested in. It seemed like at running back and wide receiver, you almost couldn't miss with these guys who went from the big face to a small place. So let me go through a couple. All right. So Ajo, Clemson goes to South Florida. First thing that I want to do is look for these guys with physical talent that go to big schools that are 4 or 5 stars, and he goes to South Florida. South Florida has had fantasy relevant wide receivers in the recent history, and I think that he could be that guy again, and he costs you nothing in a draft. Same thing, I'll go at running back Sean Shivers. Shivers goes from the SEC to Indiana, and I think he has talent. When I saw him run, he was every bit as good as running as Tank Bigsby and the like. He could go to Indiana. He could thrive immediately. And again, he's going to cost you nothing. Jacob Copeland going from Florida to Maryland. And I guess I got Maryland on my mind, but it's a really good offense. The kid has a lot of physical talent. And again, what I look for are those guys that are 4 and 5 star talents that are getting to go somewhere that just is a little easier. It could have been the environment in the school, how large the school was, or program or coaching. And the last one on my list, and there's a couple more to hit on, but the last one that I think is the most exciting is Amonte Watkins. And almost nobody knows who this guy is. I didn't really know who he was until the other day. And then I looked today and thought, this is a guy I want to spot shadow. So we got a running back that's going from TCU to New Mexico State, who is a 4-star running back. Look, these guys don't get 4-star running backs. And why couldn't this guy be a 1,000-yard rusher and 10 touchdowns for nothing? Mm-hmm. A lot of people look at the transfer portal and who to draft first. I look at the transfer portal as who to draft last.
Nope, I think that is absolutely fair. And again, Amonte Watkins, I saw him on 247's transfer portal rankings the other day, and I was shocked because I was just like, I've never heard of this guy before, but 247 has him as a transfer rating of 0.90, which I was like, okay. Like I've seen like guys go from like 4-star to 3-star in the transfer portal, stuff like that, but they kept this guy as a 4-star, and he's going to New Mexico State, and I'm just like, I'm gonna keep an eye on you. You might be somebody to look out for here in a little bit. So, Mitch, I appreciate you.
How do you, in general, look at that? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What's your point? How do you look at the transfer portal before we bounce?
I think it's one of those things where, again, it depends on where you're playing. Because CFF, I think you're ready to go. I think it is a good idea to look at and be like, all right, this guy's downgrading a little bit. Maybe he's going to get some opportunity to kind of shine, especially once they get into conference play. When they're playing Power 5, a group of 5, Power 5, stuff like that, You might be a little hampered there because, you're playing up to competition and everything. Maybe they don't do as well. But again, once they get to that conference play, it's like why we love these MAC running backs and stuff like that. You never play them when they're playing a Power 5 team, but man, once they play against each other, they're golden. In terms of like how you might want to view this in like C2C or even like a Devi league or something like that, it's a little bit of a red flag sometimes when you see a guy that you want to do well feel the need to go down a level of competition or perform well. It's a little bit of a red flag, but even still, like I said at the beginning of the show, a lot of times it's just a second opportunity. A lot of times it's just a guy needing a change of scenery, and now he works better with the coaching staff. They're able to coach him up better, and he's still going to be great. He's still going to be drafted well in the NFL draft.
Two guys that came to my mind, and quarterback is the position that scares me the most on the guy going down. Because if you're a good quarterback at a good program, they rarely, want you to leave. Mm-hmm. But Woody Barrett and Malik Willis were both guys. They were 4-star guys. They were athletic dual threat guys that went down in competition, and both were super fantasy relevant for college fantasy football. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm definitely, I would throw up monstrous red flags in Devi.
Yeah.
If your guy goes from Alabama to Alabama State, he's probably not going to start for Tampa Bay. It's just not going to happen. But we're not talking about that today. So again, last one for me, look for those dual threat quarterbacks that enter the transfer portal and go down in conference. Those are the guys that tend to hit the most often.
I think that's absolutely fair.
And not like Chase Bryce, who goes down, but is a thrower, because then you got to get the offense in. When you're the offense and you go from Alabama to Southern Miss, the offense went with you. So anyway,
I think that's fair.
Man, thanks for having me on, dude. I had a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Before we move on from transfer portal news, I'm just going to run through some additional names of interest. We're not going to talk about this, but it's just names you should probably keep an eye on. Christian Beal-Smith, starting running back for Wake Forest, is transferred over to South Carolina. South Carolina is sucking up so much offensive talent out of the transfer portal. Isaiah Nayor, former wide receiver 1 at Wyoming, transferring over to Tennessee. I like that one a lot. Montrell Johnson, running back out of Louisiana, following Billy Napier to Florida. Definitely one to keep an eye on there. Probably running back by committee, but again, just something to keep an eye on there. Amani Bailey, running back out of Louisiana, transferring over to TCU, with them losing Zach Evans. Maybe take a look around there. We talked about Jarrett Doege from West Virginia to Western Kentucky already. Austin Jones, running back out of Stanford. A lot of people high on him last year. He's in the transfer portal now. Maybe he's one of these guys. Goes from big name to small pond, like Mitch is saying. Frank Ladson, wide receiver out of Clemson, is now moving on to Miami. I know a lot of people are excited about that one. I'm not super excited about that one. We'll see kind of going forward. I think if you're going to get a Miami guy, you get one that's already in-house. Justin Robinson, wide receiver out of Georgia and Mississippi State. That one's going to fly under the radar, but I'm telling you from practice reports I've heard from Georgia, Robinson is an excellent X-receiver, and you should absolutely expect him to maybe at least push for that starting lineup at Mississippi State going forward. And then the last one here, another tight end, Kamar Gamble, tight end out of Florida. He has announced that he is transferring to UCF today. So those are all just names that are out there. Quick rundown. Write them down. Maybe you forget about them in 5 minutes. We'll see. If it's somebody we really want to talk about, we'll have plenty of opportunity this offseason. So we've hit the transfer portal. That's been the main thing here today. Just so many guys to talk about. Constantly news being updated. But unless you've been sleeping under a rock for the past week, obviously the biggest thing to happen in college football this past week was this game. The national championship between Alabama and Georgia. And Mitch, we discussed this game quite a bit before we even got on here, but I could take this 1,000 different ways because I'm a Georgia fan. There's so many things I could point out in this game. So I'm going to let you start the discussion, and we'll kind of go from there. What did you think about this game? What were the things that stood out to you?
All right, so first, just a few seconds again. I want to say congratulations. When you say you're a Georgia fan in fantasy circles, I believe you are the Georgia fan. So it's always fun when your team wins. So congratulations with that. That's super cool. So a couple of things. One is the way I watched the game. I watched the game on the Skycam broadcast. And if you haven't been a part of any of the Skycam broadcasts, what you get is an overhead view of the game with the announcer in the back at the game. No Kirk Herbstreit, no anybody. what this makes you do if you're a guy who really watches football is you have to watch.
Yep.
I actually watched Jameson go down and didn't get the analysis. And while I wanted to switch channels to see, is he coming back? Is he coming back? I stuck with it because the guy in the booth doesn't know. So my observations from the game from Skycam right out of the gate was that Georgia seemed to be just a half a step ahead. And during the SEC championship, they seemed to be a step and a half behind. And when I saw Billingsley blow a couple of third downs that led to early field goals, there's a stat that I put up for Mr. Lobb on Twitter. It used to really hold water. It doesn't happen very often in college football, but it held water. A team that begins their game with 9 points generally loses because you only have so many scoring opportunities. And if you kick 3 field goals in a row, you lose. 2 of those field goals were Billingsley's fault. So, Alabama could have put more pressure on an offense that I don't know how you guys put up with Stetson Bennett all year. The metformin should be flowing in Georgia for high blood pressure. I'm stunned that they really came back with that kid. It's a great story. But Georgia's team as a whole, almost every unit is better than Alabama's. Mm-hmm. And what's weird is talking to the number one Georgia fan that I know, you, before this show, you don't have confidence that y'all are going to roll next year. And what's weird is what I'm curious is this going to be fluke or have we seen a changing of the guard? And what's weird is I kind of think the guard's changing and you don't. So it makes me think that I might be just seeing this through rose-colored glasses.
So I'll whatchamacallit? I'm not correcting you because it definitely did sound like that's how I was thinking. I don't think this one game is the changing of the guard. Kirby's going to be around at Georgia for a long time to come. He's incredible at recruiting, and despite what people are saying, he is very good at development. Maybe not development at the QB position, but almost every other position on the field, except maybe a QB, wide receiver, everything else, he is golden at. William Poole went from being a liability in the SEC championship game where they got several touchdowns and over 100 yards on him to only holding 29 yards in the national championship. That is development right there. You don't turn around like that without a good coaching job right there. And he had a massive breakup late in the game that kept Alabama from converting a 3rd and 12 that would have kept the drive alive, that would have probably kept them or tied them back up in the game, or really have taken the lead again. So I don't think this one game is a changing of the guard. The changing of the guard is going to occur over the next several years. Georgia and Alabama, as we've seen since really Georgia went to the national championship in 2017, facing Bama, that's when it started. That's when I think the changing the guard has started. A lot of people were worried that Georgia would continue to mess up and that changing the guard would never occur. I think now that Georgia has beaten Bama, it is like you're not going to see Georgia beat Bama from every time from here on out because Saban's going to always be there. He's a great coach. There's no denying that. But there's never going to be that air over the game constantly being like, oh, Kirby can't win this one. Georgia can't win this one. They can't get past Bama. No, we've shown we can in the biggest of stages. So it'll be interesting to see that what was once a 0-4 start probably evens out over the years. So I could see like that record being 3-5 over the next couple of years, and eventually, especially once Saban retires, I know Bama's going to be able to get whatever coach they want in the country, obviously. But once Saban retires and Kirby is still younger than Saban was when he arrived at Bama, I can definitely see Georgia becoming then the dominant program. And obviously, like, people are listening to me being like, oh, you're a Georgia fan. Of course you think you're going to become the dominant program. But, like, just
not really, because earlier today you were being very objective. So like, it's almost to a fault, in my opinion. But keep going.
But it's like, like from an objective standpoint, Kirby's done everything right in order to set up Georgia to succeed in the next decade to come. The recruiting is off the charts.
So I am not a part of the Georgia bandwagon. I'll never get on the bandwagon with you. I'm not a fan. I'm not going to just become one just because they're good.
No, fair enough.
This is coming from someone who I am not a fan of Georgia. They're just a team. It could have been Clemson, who I'm not a fan of, or Pittsburgh, who I'm not a fan of. I just watched for fantasy reason. But I want to throw something out there for anybody who cares. I Googled worst quarterbacks to ever win the national championship during that game to see where Stetson Bennett would rank. I Googled best college defenses ever. And I actually looked at the game logs for Georgia's wide receivers. Here's why I say all that. One, Georgia is for real, going to be for real, and for realer, or however you say, for more real. They won in spite of having the worst quarterback, in my opinion, to win a national championship since the 90s. That's one. Two, their best wide receiver, he barely played. Pickens. Pickens is their best guy, barely played. Their best running backs, I think, are all of the kids who don't run as much as the kids who actually play. And they turned one of their best running backs into one of their best receivers with Cook. So you got a team who beats Alabama. They didn't luck into the national championship. When you get to beat Alabama, at least you get to say, we won our national championship against Alabama.
True.
So they beat Alabama with the Heisman Trophy winner. And what most people believe, or at least I believe most people will believe, Jameson would have been the first wide receiver off the board as well. So Heisman Trophy winner, best wide receiver in the country, with their best wide receivers not playing, their best running backs playing wide receiver, and the worst quarterback to win the national championship since Gino Toretta. That's pretty impressive.
I would say
you got a program going when you can say all that.
Another thing that I think people will point out, because a lot of people point out, Bama's having to rely on freshmen. All three of Georgia's touchdowns in the fourth quarter, all freshmen. Adonai Mitchell, true freshman. Brock Bowers, true freshman. Keely Ringo, redshirt freshman. Georgia has some pieces.
I'm not going to give you Bowers, though, because he's outstanding.
Okay.
Just because he's young doesn't mean he's the best. So sometimes freshman is just an age. Look, Alabama, the game would have been even more competitive if Jameson wouldn't have been injured.
Without a doubt.
But he was gimpy already. He was coming in where he wasn't 100%. And I believe when a kid isn't 100%, that's probably what led him to his injury. I'm a big believer in one injury piles onto another. So when I saw him go down, it was very disappointing because I do think he's awesome. I actually believe if you made me roll my dice that if Jameson were playing, Alabama would have scored to tie it up. It would have went into overtime and Georgia would have won this time instead of losing like they did.
My heart would not have been able to take that. I'm just saying that right now.
Now, one more Georgia thing, and again, I'll just share with everybody. Again, I'm not a fan. I rooted for Herschel Walker when I was in the third grade. Do you know that they're one Tua insane pass away from beating them twice?
Yeah.
So when you think of it like that, anyway, I thought it was a great game. And again, I'll end with what I started on. If you really want to love college football, turn off the commentators. It's almost today media in almost every way. You got to really watch out or media gets in your way. Even the stuff that, and certainly nothing that I say, but somebody like you who does this often, don't just look at Jared's list and use it. One, it's not fun because then Jared kind of won the league and you didn't. So take 17 lists. Look at whatever you want to look at, roll the dice, flip a coin, but make it yours. I saw a lot of stuff at the end of the NFL fantasy year and at the end of the college year with fans lashing out at experts like you, saying you said this and you said that and this guy went off and you said he wouldn't. Own your fantasy team. Own your fantasy lineups. Listen to folks like Jared for entertainment, but more of just edutainment. But it's still for entertainment. You shouldn't pick Watkins because I said so. Do some research because that's what makes it fun. Otherwise, why don't you just send me $10 of your winnings? if all you're going to do is listen to me.
And I think that's entirely fair. And this goes into the season as well. And like, I encourage you guys all the time, like during the season, like reach out to me if you have questions like, hey, should I start this guy, sit this guy? I'll answer them all for you. I'll give you my thoughts. And I had several of you reach out to me at the end of the year, like DMs and like adding me on Twitter being like, hey, thank you. You were the reason why I won this league and stuff like that. And like, as heartwarming as that is and everything like that, you'll have to remember that at the end of the day, like, you were the one that still made that lineup change at the end of the day. I didn't log into your Fantrax account and change it for you or anything like that. You were the one that made that decision at the day. Like, whether it be like, oh, I disagree with, or I agree with you and I'm going to do that anyway. Give yourself some credit, but also give yourself the blame if you do mess up. Like, at the same time, that's part of what makes college fantasy or just fantasy in general fun. When you have control over your teams like that, that's when the most fun it is. And that's what I'm looking forward to encouraging more people to do in 2022. And with that, I think we have really kind of reached the end of our show here. Mitch, I really appreciate you coming on, man. It is always a pleasure to be on this show or really any other show. Like, you and I did the CFFU pod with Brandon Sanders a couple of months ago, and I still go back and listen to that one, even though it's like outdated information at this point, because man, that was just a fun show. I love having you on. You always bring great insight and just always asking me questions, making me think, and I think the audience appreciates that as well, because again, as much as I like to talk and just put my thoughts out there, I think people like hearing me question. Like, again, it's part of the reason why. But anyway,
well, Mitch, I appreciate it, and
yes.
I love the work that you guys are doing, and keep it up. And like I said, same thing for the media. Have fun. Do the stuff that you want to do because you want to do it, not because anybody's listening. So yes, I always believe that if we had this conversation on the telephone with nobody listening or ever logging in, that we would say like the same thing. So, yep. So just be genuine. So I appreciate the time, and anytime you need a guest spot, let me know.
Absolutely, Mitch. Appreciate it, man. And y'all have a blessed day. Thank you. Let's go 2022.